Inside Tae-jun's private club, Valerie Kane is dragged across the floor while the music keeps playing, and every man in the room turns to watch. She is 59, silver-haired, and still too proud for the hands holding her, even when Sophia is forced down beside her in front of the entire club. A debt folder slams in front of Valerie with her dead husband's name on every page, and the enforcer tells her that the debt now belongs to her. She refuses to touch the papers, but when he grabs Sophia by the shoulder and says, "Pay, or she pays for you," Valerie lifts her eyes with a calm that makes the threat colder. Don't touch her. From the VIP booth, Kang Tae-jun stops smoking because her face cuts into something he buried years ago. For 1 second, the club disappears, and he is a starving boy on a frozen Seoul street, watching a young American woman place food in his hands. He never learns her name, but those same eyes are now kneeling in front of him. Back in the club, the men laugh and say Valerie should learn to beg, but she looks at Sophia and chooses the only weapon they left her. "I can dance." The enforcer smiles because he does not want a performance. He wants shame, and he orders her to strip first. The room turns toward Valerie as her hand moves to the fastening of her dress, and although the fabric shifts, she keeps herself covered while her fingers tremble under the weight of every stare. When a phone rises to record her humiliation, Tae-jun crushes his cigar and stands. Enough. He crosses the floor, covers Valerie's shoulders with his jacket, and expects fear or gratitude, but she gives him neither. She looks up with anger and says, "You watch too long." When his enforcer reminds him that she still owes the clan, Tae-jun does not turn around. 3 months. Valerie rises with the jacket closed, but Tae-jun steps close enough to make the room hold its breath. "Run, and I collect from your family." She holds his gaze and answers, "Follow me, and you'll regret it." Then she takes Sophia's hand and walks to the exit first. Tae-jun watches through the smoke, understanding too late that saving her from his men has not given him the right to reach her. His right hand leans close and asks, "Boss, do you know her?" Tae-jun says nothing, and the silence becomes the answer. At the hospital, Sophia sleeps beside unpaid bills, while Valerie sits in the dark with Tae-jun's jacket folded across her knees. The club is gone, but the debt has not ended, and every quiet breath from Sophia reminds Valerie that hiding will only bring the Mafia back to her daughter's bed. By morning, Valerie leaves before Sophia wakes, because waiting for mercy from men like Tae-jun is another way to lose. She puts on a gold dress, covers the fear in her hands with rings, and returns to the private club, looking less like a debtor than a woman choosing where the next wound will happen. When Valerie enters, the room changes before the music does. Men turn toward her with hunger they mistake for power, and one of Tae-jun's men laughs that she is old enough to be the boss's mother. Tae-jun hears it from the VIP booth, but he does not laugh because Valerie is not walking toward the stage like a woman asking to be forgiven. Valerie steps into the light and dances with a control that makes the room uncomfortable. She does not move like a woman begging for money. She moves like a woman forcing every man there to admit he is watching. Tae-jun's right hand says she is only trying to survive, but Tae-jun keeps his eyes on her and answers that survival should not look that much like power. When the dance ends, an older guest sends a drink toward the stage and smiles as if the glass is another leash. Valerie refuses it without lowering her eyes, and the guest stands slowly while the room waits to see whether Tae-jun will protect her or let another man test the limits of his silence. The guest steps closer and says Valerie owes the room a show, but she answers that she owes the room nothing. The glass falls from his hand and breaks at her feet, loud enough to make Sophia flinch near the doorway. Tae-jun finally stands and says, "Bring her to my table before someone else forgets she is under my debt." His right hand watches Valerie's face and says, "Boss, she is not just a dancer." By the next night, everyone in the club knows Tae-jun ordered Valerie to his table, and no one understands why she walked there without lowering her eyes. When she returns to the stage, the men stare more carefully, because a woman who has already refused the boss is more dangerous than one never claimed. Valerie dances under the red light, while Sophia watches from the edge of the room, trying not to show fear. Tae-jun sits in the VIP booth without moving, but his silence makes his men restless, because every second he watches, Valerie gives her a power they do not know how to punish. The guest from the night before walks toward the stage with a glass and a smile that makes Sophia step forward. Valerie stops her with one look because she will not let the girl become a shield again. When the man offers the drink and Valerie refuses, he laughs that a woman in debt should not act expensive. He grabs Valerie's wrist and pulls her from the stage, turning her body into a public insult before the entire room. Glasses shake as he forces her back against a table, and for one breath, everyone looks to Tae-jun as if he is the only man allowed to decide how much damage is permitted. Valerie does not wait for permission to survive. She drives her heel into the man's chest, hard enough to break his balance, and when he crashes to the floor, the silence that follows feels more dangerous than the laughter before it. The man reaches for Valerie again, but Tae-jun is already standing with a gun in his hand. The barrel points at the man before he can rise, and Tae-jun's voice stays quiet enough to make the threat worse. "No one touches what I have not decided to destroy." The room lowers its eyes, but Valerie hears possession where everyone else hears protection. She steps out from behind Tae-jun before he can become her wall and says, "Then decide faster, because I do not belong in your hands either way." Tae-jun looks at her as if her defiance has become the one debt he cannot collect. Inside the private club, Tae-jun lowers the gun after every man understands that the next mistake will cost blood. He orders the room to empty, and no one argues as chairs scrape backward and the doors close around Valerie like a second lock. Valerie stands beside the overturned table and fixes her dress with hands that refuse to shake now that the audience is gone. Tae-jun watches as if silence should soften what happened, but she gives him no fear, no gratitude, and no permission to feel like a savior. He steps closer and says he stopped the man before the room went further. Valerie looks at the jacket over her shoulders, then at the hand that waited too long. "You watched too long." Tae-jun's jaw tightens. I stopped him. Her voice stays calm enough to cut him. After he touched me, for the first time, the boss who can make a room kneel has nothing clean to command. He tells her she will stay under his protection until the debt is settled, because men in his world will keep testing her unless his name stands over her. Valerie understands the offer, and she understands the cage inside it. Protection from Tae-jun is never only safety. It is a door that locks from the outside and calls itself mercy. She removes his jacket from her shoulders and lays it on the table between them. Protection is just another cage. Tae-jun looks at the jacket as if she has returned more than fabric. Without me, they will come for you again. Valerie steps around the table, close enough for him to feel her breath, but far enough to deny him the idea of touching her. Then let them learn I am not yours either. She walks out before he can answer, and the club seems darker after the door closes. Tae-jun remains with his jacket untouched on the table, understanding that she has accepted neither his protection nor his apology. Then he turns to his right hand and says, "Follow her, and do not let her see you." The order sounds like protection, but in his eyes it becomes ownership. Before dawn, Jun Seo returns to the club with the report Tae-jun demanded after Valerie left. He places a yellowed photograph on the table, and Tae-jun's anger shifts the moment he sees his young father standing beside a younger Valerie, close enough for the past to look intimate. The woman he followed for a debt has suddenly become a wound inside his own family. Jun Seo says the photograph came from an old clan archive hidden with files that should have been burned after his father died, and Tae-jun understands that someone wanted Valerie erased long before she entered his club. When Valerie is brought back, she sees the photograph before she sees Tae-jun's face. The room is empty except for the two men watching her, but the pressure feels worse than the crowd because this time they are not looking at her body. They are looking for the part of her history they can own. Tae-jun pushes the photograph across the table and says, "You knew my father." Valerie keeps her hands at her sides, refusing to touch another piece of paper that men think gives them power over her. When he asks again, his quiet voice feels more dangerous than the gun. Valerie finally looks at the man in the photograph, and grief crosses her face before she can bury it. Tae-jun sees it and steps closer, not like a creditor now, but like a son who has found a locked door inside his father's death. He asks what his father was to her, and the question carries more threat than curiosity. Valerie holds his gaze and says, "Your father was the only man in your family who knew when to stop." The answer lands like an accusation against every Kang man still breathing. Jun Seo watches from the shadows as Tae-jun reaches for the photograph again and notices his father's hand near Valerie's waist without claiming it. In that detail, Tae-jun understands the debt was never only about money, and his father had kept Valerie close for a reason someone still wanted buried. The photograph pulls Tae-jun into a past his family trained him not to question. Years earlier, his father stands in a smaller club as the young heir of a violent clan, while Valerie works behind the bar and watches every door as if danger has already learned the child's name. That night, rival men stormed the alley behind the club, hunting the boy who will one day inherit the Kang name. Little Tae-jun is dragged from a car before he can scream, and the men holding him know his father will burn half the city. To get him back, Valerie sees the boy first and does not wait for permission, money, or a man with a gun. She breaks a bottle against the wall, cuts one attacker across the arm, and pulls the child behind her body while blood spreads down her own side. Tae-jun's father arrives too late to stop the wound, but not too late to see who stood between his son and death. He takes the boy from Valerie's arms, and the look he gives her is not payment. It is the beginning of a promise he will not be strong enough to keep. For months, he tries to pull Valerie out of the club world with money, papers, and a life far from the clan. Every offer reaches the same wall because he wants freedom without surrendering power. And Valerie refuses to become another secret protected by a dangerous man. When he chooses the clan, Valerie leaves first. She disappears before he can hide her, marry her off, or protect her into another cage. And years later, her husband's debt appears in the books, with signatures that look too perfect to be an accident. In the present, Tae-jun reads the old ledger until the numbers turn colder than the photograph. The debt was created after his father died, approved from inside the clan, and sealed by someone close enough to still touch his table. Jun Seo understands before anyone else that Valerie has become dangerous to Tae-jun because she can make him question his own blood. By morning, he moves first, and the trap begins in the office where the club keeps its cash. A sealed envelope disappears from the safe, and by the time Valerie returns to the stage, every camera angle has been chosen to make her look guilty. Jun Seo lets the rumor move slowly through the club because a whisper can do more damage than a bullet when the room already wants to hate her. Tae-jun is shown the footage in front of his men, and Jun Seo speaks as if he is protecting the boss from humiliation. He says Valerie used the attention around her to steal clan money and close the debt before anyone could stop her. When Valerie is pulled into the room, she does not ask what she is accused of because she can read the answer on every face. The same men who watched her dance now watch her fall into their version of the story, and Tae-jun lets the silence last long enough to wound her. He holds up the missing money report and asks whether saving him as a child made her think she was untouchable. Valerie's face tightens, but she does not defend herself like a frightened debtor. She steps toward him and makes the entire room listen. Your father trusted me. You do not even trust yourself. The words land in front of his men, and that is what makes them unforgivable. Tae-jun's pride moves faster than his doubt, while Jun Seo watches the damage settle exactly where he wanted it. Tae-jun orders his men to lock Valerie in the VIP room until she decides to tell the truth. Valerie walks before they can drag her, but when the door closes behind her, Jun Seo smiles because the boss has chosen the cage for him. The VIP room is quiet enough for Valerie to hear the lock settle behind her. She stands near the window instead of sitting, because the last time men put her on a floor, they expected fear to make her smaller, and she will not give Tae-jun that twice. He enters alone and shuts the door without looking away from her. The accusation sits between them like a weapon, and when he asks where she hid the money, his voice is controlled enough to reveal how close he is to losing control. Valerie tells him he is asking the wrong question. Tae-jun steps closer and says the wrong question is still safer than the answer she keeps refusing to give. The room tightens around them because anger is not the only thing moving between his body and hers. She turns her shoulder and pulls the fabric aside just enough to show the old scar along her ribs. Tae-jun stops speaking as Valerie tells him she got it the night rival men tried to take him, and that his father begged her to hide the truth because weakness was death in his family. For the first time, Tae-jun looks at proof instead of rumor. The scar reaches the boy he buried beneath the boss, and his hand rises before he seems to understand that he has moved toward the wound and the woman he failed to believe. Valerie catches his wrist before he touches her. Her palm presses against his chest with a boundary he has no right to cross. You lost the right to touch me when you let them put me on that floor. Tae-jun lowers his hand, and the apology he cannot say stays trapped between them. Outside the door, a phone screen glows in the dark, recording every word, every silence, and the one weakness the clan will use against him. By morning, the recording from the VIP room spreads through the clan, faster than any order Tae-jun can stop. Men who once lowered their eyes now listen to his silence beside Valerie and hear something worse than desire. They hear a weakness they can use. Jun Seo plays the recording for the elders with the patience of a man placing a knife exactly where it will hurt. He says Valerie has turned a debt into influence, and that a woman her age should not be allowed to make the boss hesitate in front of his own blood. That night, Valerie is brought into the clan hall, not as a dancer this time, but as evidence. Tae-jun stands at the head of the room, controlled and dangerous, yet every man watches whether his eyes move toward her before his mouth gives an order. One elder steps closer and studies Valerie as if age itself is a charge against her. A woman like you should know when to disappear. The room waits for shame to do what threats have not done, but Valerie lifts her chin and lets every man see she has survived worse than their judgment. Men like you have been trying to make women disappear for centuries, yet here I am. Her voice doesn't rise, but it cuts through the hall with the kind of control Tae-jun's men fear, because it doesn't belong to him. Tae-jun's hand tightens at his side, and for one dangerous second, it looks as if he might step between Valerie and the elders. Jun Seo sees it first and smiles, because the boss has already shown the room where the blade should go. The oldest elder turns to Tae-jun and says, "The clan will not follow a man ruled by an American woman with blood in his past." Then he gives the order that makes the room go still. Choose the clan or choose Valerie. The clan hall waits for Tae-jun's answer, and Valerie does not look away from him because she wants to see the exact moment he becomes his father's son. He looks at her once, long enough to make hope dangerous, and then he turns back to the elders. Tae-jun says the clan comes first, and the words land on Valerie with the weight of a sentence. His men lower their eyes in relief, but Jun-seo watches her face, because betrayal only works when the person still expected something better. Tae-jun tells himself this is strategy that he can explain later when the room is no longer full of men hungry for weakness. He orders that Valerie will keep working at the club until the debt is paid, and the cover he intended as protection sounds to her like ownership spoken in public. Valerie does not beg, argue, or give the room the pleasure of seeing her break. She reaches for the jacket still resting over her shoulders, the one Tae-jun once used to cover her shame, and slowly pulls it off as every man in the hall watches. Tae-jun's face hardens when she walks toward him, but his eyes betray the damage before his voice can hide it. Valerie places the jacket in his hands, not gently enough to be thanks, and not violently enough to be drama. She returns it like evidence. "You chose them in front of me," she says, calm enough to make the accusation worse. Tae-jun answers that she does not understand what he is doing, but Valerie knows men always call betrayal a plan when they want the wounded woman to wait quietly. She steps back before he can reach for her and leaves him holding the jacket like something already dead. At the door, she turns once and says, "Your father was weak, but you are worse." The next night, Valerie returns to the club before anyone sends for her. She walks past the guards in a black dress that does not ask for mercy, and the room changes because every man knows she was ordered to work, but no one expected her to arrive on her own terms. Tae-jun watches from the VIP booth as she steps onto the stage without asking for permission. The music starts low, and Valerie lets the first movement belong to her, not to the debt, not to the clan, and not to the man who publicly chose power over her. The dance is slower than the men expect, and that is what makes it dangerous. She uses every stare against them, turning the stage from a place of punishment into a room she controls with her shoulders, her breath, and the refusal in her eyes. Tae-jun cannot look away, and Valerie makes sure he knows it. She turns only when his gaze becomes too still, forcing him to see that the woman he tried to contain has turned his own club into proof that he no longer commands her shame. When the dance ends, the applause comes late, because the room is unsure whether it has been entertained or judged. Valerie steps down from the stage and passes close to an older guest whose loyalty to the clan has always been bought with secrets. Her hand brushes his sleeve, and a small flash drive disappears into his palm. On it are ledgers, transfers, and the first proof that Jun-seo framed her husband's debt while stealing from the clan he pretends to protect. Across the room, Jun-seo sees the exchange and understands too late that Valerie has not been dancing for survival. She has been choosing where to place the knife. Jun-seo follows Valerie into the service corridor before the club has finished pretending nothing happened. The music fades behind the door, and he grabs her hard enough to drive her shoulder against the wall, making sure no audience remains to mistake violence for discipline. He tells her the flash drive will never reach the elders, and if she keeps pulling Tae-jun away from the clan, Sophia will pay for every step. Valerie's breathing changes, but her eyes do not, because this time she came prepared for the man who smiles before striking. Jun-seo presses closer, thinking fear will make her hands weak. Valerie lets him believe it for 1 second longer, then drives the pin from her hair into his side and twists away before his grip can become another cage. He staggers, stunned more by her refusal than by the wound. Valerie kicks his knee with her heel and sends him down against the wall, then stands over him with her hair loosened and her chest rising hard enough to show she has survived without anyone arriving in time. Tae-jun rushes into the corridor with his gun drawn, but the fight is already over. He sees Jun-seo bleeding on the floor and Valerie above him, and the shame in his face is sharper than the weapon in his hand. "I told you I would protect you," Tae-jun says, but the words sound late before they finish leaving his mouth. Valerie does not lower the pin in her hand. "You keep arriving after I survive." Jun-seo laughs through the blood and looks at Tae-jun with the satisfaction of a man burning the house as he falls. "Your father was not killed by enemies," he says. "The clan ordered it." Jun-seo's confession breaks something in Tae-jun that violence cannot repair. The corridor fills with men, but no one speaks as the boss learns that his father was not taken by rivals. He was removed by the same clan Tae-jun has spent his life obeying. The truth comes out in pieces, each one uglier than the last. His father wanted to leave the Mafia, protect Valerie, and take the boy far from the bloodline, but the elders killed him before his choice could become a weakness others might follow. Valerie understands the look on Tae-jun's face because she has seen men turn grief into war before. He orders guns, names, and cars, and every command makes the hall colder as his people prepare to answer old betrayal with fresh bodies. She steps in front of him before the first order becomes irreversible. "If you start a war for me, you make me the reason men bleed again." Tae-jun says they used her husband's debt to drag her back and break him from inside, but she answers that revenge is still another cage if he lets it choose for him. For the first time, Tae-jun does not move around her. He listens as Valerie lays out the only plan that can wound the clan without feeding it more corpses. Money trails, hidden recordings, Jun-seo's betrayal, and the debt documents they were never meant to find. The men in the corridor wait for Tae-jun to command, but Valerie holds the center of the room with blood on her dress and certainty in her voice. She tells him the clan will not fall because he is angry. It will fall because everyone sees what it did. Tae-jun lowers his gun and gives the order no one expects. We follow her plan. For the first time, the boss does not command Valerie to stand behind him. At the closed clan gathering, Valerie walks into the hall without a dancer's costume, without Tae-jun's jacket, and without lowering her eyes. The elders expect a spectacle they can control, but she steps onto the stage like a woman arriving to collect what they buried. The screens behind her come alive before anyone can stop them. Ledgers, recordings, transfers, and photographs fill the room, showing the false debt, Jun-seo's theft, and the order that sent Tae-jun's father to his death. The elders shout for the screens to be cut, but the evidence has already entered every phone in the hall. Men who built their power on silence begin looking at one another, and Valerie watches the clan fracture under the weight of its own records. One elder moves toward her, and Tae-jun steps in front of Valerie by instinct. For a second, the room sees the old story trying to repeat itself. The dangerous man, the protected woman, and the debt paid through his body. Valerie does not let him finish the gesture. She walks out from behind his back faces the elders herself and says, "You used my life to hide your murder. Now you will watch me say it where everyone can hear." Jun Seo tries to run while the room turns against itself, but Tae-jun's men close the exits before he reaches the door. For once, Tae-jun does not look at the traitor first. He looks at Valerie and understands that she took the stage without needing him to save her. By the time Jun Seo is forced to his knees, the clan's silence is broken beyond repair. Tae-jun thinks the fall of his enemies means Valerie will finally stay. But Valerie is already looking past him toward the door. Morning reaches the club after the clan falls, but the room still feels owned by everything done inside it. The screens are dark, the elders are gone, and Tae-jun places Valerie's debt papers, hospital receipts, money, and a house key on the table, as if freedom can be arranged in one neat pile. Valerie looks at the documents before she looks at him, because freedom handed over by a dangerous man can still feel like another contract. Tae-jun says the debt is erased, Sophia is safe, and no one in his city will ever come for her family again. He tries to make the promise sound like power, but shame breaks through the control. "I did not want you as a debt," he says. "I wanted you because you made me ashamed of what I became." Then he asks her to stay, and the question strips more authority from him than any gun ever could. Valerie does not answer quickly. Part of her remembers the starving boy in the snow, but the woman standing before him remembers the floor, the hands, the laughter, and how long he waited before stopping it. "You saved me from your men," she says, "but you did not save me from what you made me feel on that floor." Tae-jun reaches for her, not like a boss this time, but like a man afraid the door has already closed. Valerie steps back before his fingers can touch her, and that small distance takes from him every right he thought guilt, protection, or confession had earned. She takes the papers, leaves the key on the table, and walks toward the morning light with her shoulders straight. "You can own the city, but not me." Tae-jun does not order anyone to bring her back, because chasing her would only prove she was right to leave. 1 month later, an envelope arrives at Tae-jun's office with no name on the front. Inside is an old photograph of his father and Valerie, folded around one sentence written on the back: "He was not the only man in your family who loved me." Tae-jun lifts his eyes, and the city feels too small for the truth still buried.